Hey everybody, Jim here, and I just got back from seeing the new remake of A Jungle Book. And I really liked this movie, and I was kind of surprised by that because Disney's been on this whole live action remake kick in the last few years, and I've really not been a fan of some of them. I mean, the new Cinderella was okay, but Maleficent and Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, both pieces of crap. I mean, good visuals in both of them, good performance by Angelina Jolie, but these movies completely and totally missed the point of both the fairy tales and older movies that they were adapting. Just totally missed the point. This movie, in many ways, it takes the 1967 animated Disney movie, and yes, this is definitely a straight-up remake of the 1967 animated Disney movie rather than a readaptation of the Robert Kipling books, and in some ways, improves on it. It really does. Alright, first of all, let's get the obvious out of the way. The visuals in this movie are absolutely gorgeous. This is some of the most photorealistic and well-designed computer-generated animals I have ever seen in an animated in a movie, and it just looks really fantastic. This is mostly a computer-animated movie with some live-action elements, probably something like 80% computer-animated, kind of like Gravity in that regard. As you have live-action actors and a few live-action props here and there mixed in, but this is mostly an animated movie, and it's a really well-done animated movie. It looks very realistic. We're probably only a decade or two away from when computer animation in movies look so realistic that it's indistinguishable from live action. That's going to happen in our lifetime. There's almost no doubt about it. Unless your lifetime is very short, in which case, sorry. Ignoring the better visuals, this movie also does other things better than the 1967 movie. For one thing, I like that this movie really develops Mowgli's relationship with the wolf pack that supposedly raised him. Like, in the 1967 movie, he leaves them close to the beginning of the movie, and he barely ever mentions them again. He talks about how he wants to stay in the jungle, how he likes hanging out with Baloo. His family, who he apparently lived for years, he barely seems to give a shit about them. This movie, he actually seems to care about his family. That's really nice. And the villains are also much more threatening in this movie. I can't imagine any kids being scared by Shere Khan or Kaa in the original. I can imagine them being a bit scary in this movie. It was kind of odd that they changed Kaa's gender. Kaa apparently has a female voice now, but Scarlett Johansson kind of gave him a menacing tone to it that he never had, voiced by the guy who did Winnie the Pooh. And Idris Elba's Shere Khan was really awesome. He spills blood in this movie, okay? This is a scary, threatening character. The one thing I will say that goes to the 67 movie, that one had a better Baloo. Bill Murray's Baloo in this movie is perfectly fine, but Phil Harris's Baloo in the original is still so iconic and just so lovable. He's easily the best thing in that movie, and Bill Murray's Baloo just isn't as likable as Phil Harris's Baloo was. And that's nothing against Bill Murray. His version of Baloo is perfectly fine, but it just doesn't have quite the likability that Phil Harris does. So that's where I would definitely give points to the 1967 movie. Also, commenting on King Louie, who now, instead of an orangutan, is a Gigantopithecus. Which is kind of an odd decision, because they justify it with the fact that orangutans aren't found in India. Yeah, that's true, but how is making him an ape that's been extinct for over 200,000 years, in a setting that's probably relatively modern, how is that more plausible than an orangutan being in India? I mean, they could have just had a line about him having escaped from a zoo or something. That kind of would be a little more plausible. But I guess making him gigantic like that kind of does make him more an intimidating threat, I will admit. And it's kind of cool seeing a Gigantopithecus on screen. Because there really was an ape that was nearly that big, according to fossil evidence. Though, maybe not quite that big, but pretty damn close. And Baloo looks much more like a brown bear, particularly with his size, than he does look like an Indian sloth bear. So much for going for regional accuracy there. But Anyway, Christopher Walken voices him, and his rendition of "I Want to Be Like You" is kind of odd in this one. It's kind of more cutesy and fun in the original. Here, it's kind of scary. Most of the songs in the original movie aren't in this one. A couple are redone a little bit, but it's mostly not a musical. And those vultures that are kind of meant to be like the Beatles, they're not in this. So overall, I definitely really like this movie for a few things. It did a couple of things real better than the 67 movie did. There's a couple elements from the Kipling books that it incorporates that weren't in the 67 movie, which are done pretty well. And, as I said, it's visually an absolute marvel. Particularly, it does really well with its 3D effects. It utilizes 3D in its jungle setting better than I've seen in a while from a 3D movie. So, definitely, this one comes pretty well recommended. It's not a perfect movie, but it's definitely a good movie and easily the best live-action remake Disney's ever done of an old animated movie. Supposedly they have a live-action Beauty and the Beast coming out next year. I hope it's more in the mold of this movie and less in the mold of Maleficent or anything like that. So overall, pretty good flick. Definitely, Disney did right with this one. So, check it out if you want. Alright, have a good night.